G'day guys, I'm Mac with the Outer Circle, and in today's episode I want to look at the Space Wolves and Leman Russ in particular. So, many of you would know that I'm a long-time Thousand Suns player and that straight away I have opinions about Leman Russ and the Space Wolves. Today I want to look at Leman Russ as a character and how he is just a potato of a character, thoroughly unlikable. His actions, motivations, none of it seems to make any sense, yet the authors love him and Space Wolves fans praise him, but Space Wolves fans seem to be utterly incapable of recognising why other people don't like their Legion and don't like their Primarch. So today we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on this character and talk about those particular flaws. So this isn't like those other channels that do, like, this is the Primarch and then they'll spend 40 minutes talking about every campaign they fought, yada yada. No. We're going to look at this guy, and essentially, let's start with his relationship with his brothers. So he is the second Primarch who is discovered, after Horus. Of course, this is subject to multiple retconnings, where, Alpharius is first discovered and hidden away, and yada yada yada. Ignore all that. Horus, as far as we're concerned for the sake of this video, first discovered Primarch, and when the Emperor discovers Leman Russ and brings him aboard his flagship, Horus is there to meet him and greet him, and the two basically size one another up. Now, from the get-go here, Russ is shown to be not a dumbass. He is switched on. He is capable of learning very quickly, as you would imagine with his superhuman intellect and physiology. And the barbarian savage is a sort of facade that he likes to show others in order to lull them into a false sense of security. But deep down, he's actually a very capable person. In theory, because we don't really see that actually employed. Now, Leman Russ has 3 big run-ins prior to the heresy with his brothers, and the first one is a run-in with the Lionel Johnson of the Dark Angels. The second is a run-in with Angron, and the third is a run-in with Magnus. So we're going to look at those 3. The first one is the run-in with Lionel Johnson on a world that they're trying to bring into compliance, and the problems begin straight away with when the Space Wolves enter the system. The Space Wolves come in and find the Dark Angels already in the midst of a void battle, fighting this enemy fleet. And they're told, don't get involved because you don't understand the situation. And of course, the Space Wolves, well...
It's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy!
Russ.
Oh my god, he just ran in. Save him!
Oh geez, stick to the plane!
Oh Jesus, let's go.
So anyway, that happens, and what happens is they start firing upon enemy ships and blowing up enemy ships, and it turns out those ships are full of Dark Angels boarding parties, so they kill a bunch of Dark Angels who were boarding those ships. Ships that could have been captured by those Dark Angels, and so a bunch of friendly fire incidents happen. Now, what is the reprimand for this? Well, Lionel Johnson naturally sort of gets on the radio and says to Russ politely, what the hell is going on, you lawful stupid idiot. And Leman Russ is like, oh, well, it happens, whatever. Doesn't really seem to care that much about the situation. And, Lionel Johnson's like, there needs to be some sort of repercussions for this, and Leman Russ doesn't really see fit to do anything about it. So straight away, really proves how honourable a fighter he is there. Of course, that's my interpretation of the book. You're welcome to go and read that Leman Russ Primarch novel for yourselves. So when they're trying to actually complete this compliance on this planet, there is a lesson that is trying to be taught to Leman Russ by Lionel Johnson, which is, Leman Russ, get the job done. It doesn't matter if you have a personal vendetta against the enemy, okay, because they called you a name or they called the Emperor a name or whatever. The important part is compliance. Bring the world into subjugation. Doesn't matter how you do it, just get the job done. Get it done. And whilst this is happening, Leman Russ then gets insulted by the leader of this planet and decides that he wants to have a grudge match against this leader. And he is conducting the battle slowly because he wants to take down every single enemy unit and yada yada yada. And the whole time, Lion is going, no, no, no. Focus on the big picture here. We can take the whole planet. You don't need to overwhelm and kill every single bunker full of enemies. They'll surrender. You know, we can just decapitate the head, as it were, kill the leader of this planet, and it's over. And the Lion just isn't going for that. Of course, he does get sidetracked along the way in his defense, trying to deal with a wolfen outbreak, but, you know, the Dark Angels were already dealing with that for them, because they're actually helpful in that regard. And what happens is the Lion goes, you know what, stuff this, teleports into the throne room, kills the enemy leader, and then Russ goes, hey, you stole my kill, after rocking up like 40 minutes late to the battle. And so Leman Russ then gets into a fist fight with the Lion, and it lasts famously for a day and a night, and he gets essentially defeated. The Lion disarms him, has him at knife point or sword point, and Leman Russ goes in for the melee, the hand-to-hand, the real hand-to-hand is in a fist fight, and disarms the Lion from that point, not understanding the Lion has given him a chance to yield honourably, because the Lion, as far as he's concerned, is taking this as an honour duel of sorts, whereas Leman Russ is, you know, he's just pissy at him for kill stealing. So Leman Russ starts fighting the Lion, and eventually Leman Russ sort of stands up and goes, this is kind of silly, and starts laughing. And of course the Lion, being the Lion, is like, oh, he's laughing at me, cool, and just knocks him the hell out. Okay, just done, dusted, one hit KO. Right, 2 Primarchs fought that day, 1 walked away. And Leman Russ gets up from that experience, having learned essentially nothing except that the Lion doesn't screw around.
Come on, Alan. This picture throws like a girl. What'd you say? You heard me, asshole. You want me to kick your ass right here?
Russ. Sit down.
You want a piece of me? Because I'm pretty sick of your goddamn mouth. What do you want to do, huh? What do you want to do?
Russ.
Don't.
You better shut up, asshole! I'm standing right here. How do you want to handle it? I told you to shut up! I'm sorry, I thought this was America!
So, next out, Leman Russ decides, you know what, I'm going to go teach Angron a lesson. Because he didn't like how the Butcher's Nails were in Angron's Legion, and how they were bloodthirsty savages, and yada yada. And of course, with a legion like the World Eaters, you don't try and use them to bring compliance to a peaceful world. You know, a nice world, a pleasant world with rolling green meadows and a peaceful civilian populace. You use the World Eaters to fight some crazy Xenos species that doesn't matter how high casualties either side gets, because you're going to exterminate the other side anyway. That's where you use the World Eaters. So it's not really a problem in the scheme of things that the World Eaters all have Butcher's Nails. They're like a claymore. You point them at the enemy, and then you hit the clacker, and away they go. However, Leman Russ thinks, I am the second Primarch discovered, I'm the Emperor's chosen executioner, I'm the instrument of his will, therefore I have the right to pass judgment on my other brothers and tell them how to do their jobs. So he goes out of his way on no one's command, and basically tries to tell Angron how to do his job. And ironically, the lesson he's trying to give Angron is kind of similar to the lesson the Lion was trying to give him, which is you don't need to kill everything, okay? You just need to win the battle and win the strategic war overall. Of course, that's okay when it's the Lion talking to Leman Russ, who in theory has a functioning brain. Of course, Angron, as we know, is missing most of his brain because it was replaced by the Butcher's Nails, as was in most of his legion. So you can't reason with madmen. I mean, Gorgar actually found a way to do it in Betrayer, and that's another story. But Leman Russ's idea was, hey, this guy that goes berserk and loses all sense of himself once fighting, I'm going to goad him into a fight. And it's not Angron who picks the fight, it's Leman Russ. And so Angron and Leman Russ start fighting.
Let him have it, yeah! Guess that's my guy. I can take him, no problem. Why don't you shut your mouth before I kick your ass? Come on, let's go! I'm right here!
Russ.
Sit down before you get hurt! Motherfucker! I'm sorry, I thought this was America!
And during the fight, Angron wins. He puts Leman Russ on his ass and could kill him. But he is surrounded by Space Wolves, and essentially the implied threat is, see Angron, you let your sense of bloodlust get the better of you, you're now surrounded by the Space Wolves, and we can kill you, okay? Because you're not using tactics, you're just running ahead up the guts with no smoke. Forgetting the fact that, of course, to do this in the first place, he's given up the tactical advantage on the rest of the battlefield by pooling all of his resources to fight Angron, so the rest of the Space Wolves Legion out there on the battlefield is getting the absolute crap knocked out of them by the World Eaters Legion. Pretty funny. So, potato move there, because the lesson he tried to teach was, you'll lose this fight, but in the end, well, the Space Wolves actually would have lost the fight, but both Primarchs would have died doing so. That's kind of a bittersweet irony. And then the next one, of course, is with Magnus. So he's told, go and arrest Magnus. And then partway along, he gets new orders from Horus, who says, don't arrest him, kill him. And he's like, that seems like a good idea. And of course, let's preface this. He goes to the Council of Nicaea, him and his guys, and they speak out against the Thousand Sons and Psykers. Now, this is a bit bizarre, because if they have a problem with the way Magnus uses Psykers, then you think they wouldn't be trying to ban the use of Psykers, but rather the methods used by the Thousand Sons. Instead, in their infinite potato wisdom, they ban all Psykers, which makes no sense. Okay? If you're unhappy with the way the Thousand Sons are doing it, change the way they do it. Don't just forbid all use of psychic powers, because you're kneecapping yourselves, as they very, very quickly discover after passing the Edict of Nicaea. So, apparently, they don't count as using Psykers, though, and so ignore the Edict of Nicaea, the Space Wolves, because they're using the power of Fenris, not the power of the warp.
You need to realize that you have something in your brain that you somehow inherited from your grandpa that makes you act this way, okay?
I don't know how you can say that when you're standing here chugging.
Psykers. I'm not using Psykers. I'm using Weird and the power of Fenris. It is definitely not the warp.
Which is, as we know, no matter how writers try and frame it as totally different, it's the same bloody thing. The warp works in mysterious ways, but at the end of the day, they're using the warp. Okay, they can still suffer perils of the warp in the tabletop. They're using the warp. Okay, and so to criticize the Thousand Sons because they overuse the warp is one thing, but to say that using the warp is wrong whilst doing warp tricks yourself is very, very stupid and hypocritical at the same time. So anyway, they go to Prospero, and despite the fact that Constantine Veldor of the Custodian Guard and I think Janisha Kroll and the Sisterhood are both with him, and they take their orders directly from the Emperor, not the War Master, not Russ, but from the Emperor, and their direct orders from the Emperor were bring back the Thousand Sons. They go along with the plan too, so they're not blameless in this. And when he gets there, right, they try to retcon it a little bit, and they're like, well, he didn't just attack straight away. He did try to communicate with Magnus. He did try to send him a radio signal. It's like, fly down there. Have a face-to-face, all right? He was willing to have a face-to-face with Angron, but he's not willing to even attempt a face-to-face with Magnus. Okay, that's just silly. And so instead he gets pissy because Magnus never replies to his radio message, which never gets through. So he then decides that he's going to absolutely royally destroy the entire planet of the Thousand Sons, because that is, of course, what you do when you're met by radio silence. I mean, you'd hate to be a girl dating Leman Russ who leaves him on read, because he's probably going to come home and will come around and burn your house down because you didn't reply to his text straight away. So he goes down, does the fight, you know.
Viva la Pueblo!
Pueblo no bueno. Pueblo es muy mal. Is this a communist country or something? I thought this is America.
He can't actually beat Magnus in the fight. He's shown by Magnus that his actions are wrong, he's being manipulated, and then his two wolves sick on Magnus, which gives Russ an opening to win the fight. And of course, Space Wolves players this day will sit there and tell you, The line only won because Russ gave up. Russ beat Angron tactically, and he broke Magnus's back. Like, they just conveniently forget the actual surrounding circumstances of these things, which is pretty funny to me personally. So anyway, all of these three things occur. Now the Horus Heresy breaks out, and Russ is like, oh crap, what have I done on Prospero? Because my legion is heavily mauled from the fighting, because even though the Thousand Sons sent their fleet away, lowered all their defences, and weren't prepared or entrenched for combat, and got jumped by not just the Space Wolves' entire legion, but by the Custodes and the Sisters of Silence, those Space Wolves still lost a ton of Marines, but they won, quote unquote. So the Space Wolves are limping away, and Russ is like, I better keep an eye on other Primarchs just in case they go traitor. Even though, he knows Magnus wasn't actually a traitor, it's Horus. So he himself, again, decides that he's in the position to decide to check on his brothers. So he sends squads of Space Wolves out there to shadow the other loyalist Primarchs to make sure they do the right thing. The balls on this man. The atrophied steroid balls on this man. What the hell? So he sends these squads of Space Wolves out there, and then he gets jumped by the Alpha Legion at the Alaxes Nebula. So the Alaxes Nebula is the Alpha Legion are trying to goad the Space Wolves and essentially take the Legion out of the fight. And Russ is like, holy crap, my depleted Legion cannot take on the entire Alpha Legion, because the Alpha Legion, of course, are not idiots. They are one of the punching bags of the Heresy. Whenever someone needs to beat up on someone else, it's usually the Alpha Legion that gets beaten up in the Heresy. Just talk about what happened with Alpharius on Pluto. So the Alpha Legion are all about void warfare in this circumstance. They have a well-trained fleet. It's not the best fleet of void warfare, that probably goes to the Imperial Fists. But the Space Wolves just completely neglect using their fleet or using tactics in the void necessarily. They're all about, let's just get in close and do boarding actions, like the World Eaters, but minus Ursus Claws, which are actually not a dumb idea. And of course, the Alpha Legion don't play that game. The Alpha Legion just kite them. So they've got a bigger fleet, and they hold their distance and just pummel the crap out of the Space Wolves. But of course, eventually boarding actions from both sides do occur, and Leman Russ is pissy that for some reason, Alpharius won't just come and fight him mano a mano. Because again, Alpharius is not an idiot, but of course Leman Russ is, and he thinks that a Primarch would put himself at deliberate disadvantage like that, for some sort of sense of honour or duty, when, hey, you're fighting a war. Doesn't matter how you fight the war, how you prosecute it. Right? So he's like, crap, I need help. So he calls to the nearest brother that he can find, which is, of course, Jagadai Khan of the White Scars, who's been fighting off in Chondax and out of contact with things, because, well, he can't get a hold of Guilliman, because the Ruined Storm is already setting in at this point, starting to set in. Dawn and Sanguinius are both on the other side of the galaxy, wrapped up in things. They're no help. Isfahan 5 is underway, and they already know about the tragic outcome of that. And that leaves the Imperial Fists on Terra. So they're not in a good way here, the Space Wolves. So they go, Jagadai, can you please help us out? And of course, Jagadai learns about what happened on Prospero, and he's like, well, what the hell? That's out of the blue. Until I find out what the actual, situation is, I'm not going to help either side in this war. I need to find out the truth. So he's going to travel to Prospero, and of course Russ, instead of going, okay, that's fair, I understand in the fog of war, like I myself was tricked by Horus into fighting Magnus, who was nominally a loyalist. I could understand you wanting to take precautions. Instead, Russ goes, how could anyone doubt my loyalty? And gets pissy about it, and says basically, if I ever see Jagadai again, I'll kill him. Because, again, Leman Russ is a renowned genius, whose Space Wolves players adore. So he does this, and, of course, cracks it at him. Now, he then retreats to Terra, or moves to Terra, after the Alaxes Nebula, because he gets saved by a small fleet of, well, it's actually a pretty large fleet of Dark Angels under Causewayne, the sort of Seneschal of the Ninth Order, I believe it is. Basically the coolest of the Dark Angels. And Russ heads to Terra, and when he gets to Terra, basically gets involved in fighting traitors, moves, reorganizes, resupplies, tries to rebuild his legion because he's so depleted after both Prosper and Alaxes, and starts heading back out into the void to fight traitors. And eventually, along comes his brother Primarch, Jagadai Khan, who has been fighting for 4 straight years at this point against the traitors behind enemy lines, just savaging their supply lines and columns, but he gets to the point where he can't keep that up. He's losing too many numbers, and he knows that the fight is drawing to an end. So Jagadai Khan, the man who doesn't believe in walls, comes to Terra, and he basically says to Russ, do what you want with me. And Russ at least says, alright, I'm never going to forgive you for abandoning me at Alaxes, even though your logic is very sound, and I'm a potato, but I won't kill you. How generous of Leman, Russ. So then they end up going to Terra together, and they have a council, and this council includes Constantine Valdor, Melchador the Sigillite, Sanguinius, Rogel Dawn, Jagadai Khan, and Leman Russ, and they're having a discussion. It goes something like this. Rogel Dawn says, I think all of our legions need to fight together at Beta Garmin and here on Terra. Sanguinius goes, I agree. Jagadai Khan, the guy who hates walls and hates sieges and fortifications and believes in fighting the enemy in the open, goes, yeah, I agree. Melchador Sigillite, yes, I agree. Constantine Valdor, I agree. Leman Russ, I'm going to go fight Horus on my own.
Alright, chums,
ready, guys?
let's do this. Leroy!
Russ.
Even though he's got a bigger fleet, a superior fleet, the aid of the Chaos Powers, I've got a cool golden spear, which, should fuck him up. So, Leman Russ goes to try and do exactly that. And of course, he gets on Horus's flagship, gets the opportunity to kill him, doesn't really take it. He stabs him with a spear, and for a moment, it gives Horus a sort of vision through the chaos that carried, and Leman Russ is like, I think I can redeem him, whilst looking around at the chaos-infested vengeful spirit around him, the possessed demon space marines, and all the horrible things that Horus has done. Unlike with Magnus, he's like, no, I think I can redeem him. I think he's got a shot at coming back from this. And then gets royally massacred for it. Okay? So this is the character that we're dealing with here, and this is the problem with the Space Wolves Legion in general. Everything they do is a mistake. Okay? And yet they're never punished for it. They're never punished for it in the fluff, in the writing, anything. They're just favoured by the writers. And for those of us who don't play Space Wolves, and I have played them before on the tabletop, don't get me wrong, but for those of us who are not die-hard Space Wolves fans, it is infuriating to see. Especially to be told how much everyone looks up to them and how cool Space Wolves are within the universe. Because everything says that they're that guy on your team that everyone should hate because they think they're better than everyone else and they go off and do their own thing constantly. Another legion at Terra and Beta Garmin would have meant so much for the defense of the Sol system. Instead, they go off and essentially throw their lives away, pointlessly, going into a trap that Horus has laid for them, which takes a whole nother legion, or at least what's left of Space Wolves, say 40,000 or so, takes them basically out of the fight and reduces them to something above chapter strength in 40k. They are infuriating, and the Legion is like this in not just 30k, but in 40k. Okay? So when I picked on Rogel Dawn in a relatively recent video and said, this is why people can't stand them. Well, this is why people can't stand Space Wolves. Because they do really dumb things and get rewarded for it. I really can't stress that point enough. Because if any other Legion did these dumb things, you wouldn't see the players sitting there defending them for it. That's the key difference here. Nothing the Space Wolves have done is smart. Nothing is common sense. Leman Russ supposedly has the facade of being a mindless dumb brute, and yet a intellectual underneath it all, and yet every one of his actions is the actions of a mindless dumb brute. And not only that, he has this massive superiority complex where he turns around and goes, I don't like brothers like Magnus because they think they're better than everyone else. Anyway, I'm going to go send my legion to look after the other Primarchs and make sure they pull their weight and don't fall to chaos because I'm better than everyone else. Like, it is such a profound self-own. And that's why people don't like the Space Wolves Legion. And it's why I really don't like Leman Russ. There is nothing redeeming about this character. People can go and rephrase things all they like to try and make it work, to retcon it. Let's say, oh, well, him fighting Horus with the golden spear, that was he learned from Prospero. He gave his brother a chance to, redeem himself. And, it's like, that's revisionist history. That is like when they wrote at Black Library how, Abaddon's failed Black Crusades. They weren't failed Black Crusades. They achieved limited strategic objectives. It's just dumb, okay? And that's Leman Russ's story in a nutshell. He goes out of his way to just fight all of his brother Primarchs when there are so many other ways he could have performed these events, these activities. He could have tried talking with Angron, and instead of being an arrogant bastard about it and going to Angron like, hey, I'm here to put you in your place, he could have phrased it as, hey, I was coming in to fight alongside your brother, fight with him for a campaign or two, actually build up a relationship, a rapport, fighting alongside the World Eaters, earning that sense of brotherhood that Lorgar, of all people, managed to earn. The guy who was considered a bit of a bitch by the other Primarchs earned Angron's respect. No, not Leman Russ. He couldn't bring himself to do that. He just flat out turns up to Angron and says, you're dumb and you're wrong, and thinks that somehow coming in with that attitude will change the way Angron conducts himself. Spoiler alert, the guy with the mostly missing brain didn't change. And it turns out Angron, with the mostly missing brain, probably still smarter than Leman Russ. And of course, Leman Russ and Magnus, as I said, hey, you use Psykers the wrong way, which of course made Magnus raise his one eyebrow. Or the way he conducted himself with Lionel Johnson. Lionel Johnson, the older brother, clearly the better fighter of the two, better strategist of the two, the better tactician of the two. The guy who the Emperor trusted with all the crazy Dark Age relics, out of the two. He was just like pissy at him for kill stealing, for finishing the campaign on the world. Like, there is nothing likable about this guy. So, please, Space Wolves fans, what is it? What do you like about him? I want to know. What do you like about him, and what do you like about your Legion? Because let's quickly cover off on the Legion. Woofy Woof Woof of the Woof Woof. That is what everything is called in your Legion all the time. And you have dumb things, whether it's 40k or 30k. Like, we bring pet wolves to battle. Well, the Blood Angel's going to bring pet vampire bats to battle. See, it's very silly when you think about it like that. They're giant wolves. Ooh, and then they ride giant wolves. What? None of that is cool. It's dumb, it's cartoonish, and it's like something out of Warcraft. And I just don't get it. What is likable about this Legion? And the way that they drink and they fight, and it's so try-hard, wannabe edgy. I just can't stand it. But this is just me flavouring this video with my personal bias at this point. So, let me know below. I'm curious. But anyway, that's it for me, Mac with the Outer Circle. Thank you for watching the episode, and, well, I hope to see you on the next one.